Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Do you have a favorite quote, something that inspires or motivates you that you can share with us?
Yeah, so I actually have one on my wall here, and it's one I kind of live by, but it's the harder you work, the luckier you get. A lot of people always say you're lucky if you're successful, and they don't really realize the work that's gone into it prior to bringing success.
So tell us about MoveitPro. What does the product do? Who's it for? And what's the main problem you're helping to solve?
So MovitPro is a software CRM for moving and storage companies. The majority of our customers are in the United States, although we do have customers also in Canada, Australia. And it helps run literally everything from start to finish for moving companies. So everything from their, new customer comes to their website, forms come in with their information, the, estimating for customers, doing inventory on location, their billing, their dispatch, their GPS tracking, their payments, payroll, literally pretty much everything from start to finish for a moving company. If you own a moving company, you're either using our product or using a very similar product or a cluster of products to be able to get the same things done that we do.
And can you give us a sense of the size of the business? Where are you in terms of revenue, size of team, number of customers?
So right now we're right at about 35 employees. We started selling end of 2016. We just, the end of this year, we should hit 5 million.
In ARR?
Annual recurring revenue, correct. Yep.
And number of customers?
Yep, we're rated at about 800 moving and storage companies. Yep.
You started the business around 2011, or you started building the product around 2011, but it took 5 years to get your first paying customer. And we're going to talk about that because there's an interesting story there. Tell us what you were doing before 2011 and how did you get into the business of building software?
So my grandparents had originally started a moving and storage company here in Orlando, Florida, back in 1968 called J&J Metro. It's still in business today. And I kind of grew up in the moving and storage business. My dad took it over in the 80s. And, I was a little kid running around in the warehouses, riding four-wheel dollies and, helping wash trucks and stuff as a child. And, it came a time when my dad was wanting to retire and I came into the business to take it over. And this was in the, 2008, 2009, right in that range. And when I came in the business, that business had been in business for over 40 years, was a multi-million-dollar company, and everything they were doing was still on pen and paper, which to me, as a younger person, thought was absolutely insane. This is stupid. How are we running a business and we're literally still typing bill of ladings, which essentially is their invoice that the guys go out with every day on a typewriter. And so I said, there's got to be a better way, and the better way in my thought process is there has to be a software out there that does this, right? And in my research in that time, I had no intentions of wanting to build a software myself. I was trying to run a moving company. I couldn't find anything that would do everything we needed. And there was a couple companies out there, but their stuff was built like in the mid 90s. You needed servers in your office to run it. It wasn't a SaaS product. They weren't good. They weren't updated anymore. They were very outdated. And I was honestly very frustrated with it. I said, this is stupid. Why hasn't someone developed something? Why hasn't someone continued to develop? And so that's kind of how MoveitPro started, in the sense that we were trying to solve our own problem, or my own problem of why are we using a typewriter? Why are we handwriting when someone calls in over the phone? And I'm not talking a couple customers a day. I mean, this is a multi-million-dollar company. We're handwriting stuff in the mid 2000s. So that's kind of where MoveitPro started. Was that it wasn't even named MoveitPro, right? We needed a software for our own internal business. I had no intentions of ever selling it. I figured we'd spend stupidly. I figured we'd spend $25,000, $50,000. Hire a developer and write us something that would do everything we needed. That was ambitious, right?
And so you didn't, even when you thought about spending that money, you weren't thinking about building a product that you were going to sell to other people. This was to run your own business.
To run our own business, correct. Yeah. And so we kind of went down that road, and like we talked about, so there was a 5-year gap, right? We started building the product in 5 years almost before we started selling it. And part of that was, we didn't take any venture money. We weren't looking at spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, A, and B, we weren't trying to go into debt doing it. That was one thing that my grandparents and my father taught me, is you never go in debt. And that's part of what saved our moving company when the recession happened here in 2008. so many went out of business because they went in debt. We didn't. So we started developing MoveitPro, and we really realized after we had about $75,000 invested in it that we weren't even 10% done with what we would need to be a workable project. And it was over a couple of years. We were developing super slow. We hired, it was a husband and wife developers over in India that finally ended up working out and doing our project, which we're still in communication with nowadays, and they're good people. But we realized that at the pace we were going and the money we were investing in it, we would either need to, as they say, take this product behind the barn and shoot it and be done with it. And I just lost all this money. Or we needed to throw a ton more money at it and get it done and start selling it as a product.
Did you have any background in software when you started kind of set out to build this?
I did not. No, I did not.
And so you went through, I think, 5 different teams when you were kind of outsourcing until you found the right people to work with. And now, as I understand, you still work with them, but most of your development is done in-house and you have, your own development team. Tell me about that experience of finding the right developers, or maybe the first 4 iterations of that. What did you learn from that experience? What were some of the problems that you had to overcome? And I'm asking this from the perspective of, somebody else who's, in that similar position, who's saying, hey, I'm not technical. I want to go out and build some software. I want to hire somebody. I know I'm going to make some mistakes. Can Jason help me avoid some of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first started, and again, we were trying to do this inexpensively. And so, our thought process was that we would get a developer that would, kind of help us build our project, and that if they wanted to start selling it one day, they could, and they could make money with it. That was our first go at it, right? We would pay them under market value for their time, and then they would own the project and be able to do with it what they wanted once we got what we needed, and we would just stay updated. So that was the first thought process for us, which I will say now, had that developer continued to do that, they would have made a decent amount of money now and they'd have residuals coming in. But the hard thing is when you're doing that, with a project our size, we at that point had still even spent $25,000, $30,000 with them, but they had probably done $100,000 worth of work, and we weren't even, like I said, barely 10% done. So the thought process for them, which is completely understandable, is, what if I put all this time in and the project doesn't ever turn into money, right?
Right.
Developers are a sought after career right now, as we all know, and they could go and get a paying customer. It's going to pay them their full rate, and not have the risk that our project wouldn't work out.
And presumably you made that offer because you didn't think you'd be sitting here today with a $4-5 million a year software business that's still growing. It was like, well, this is maybe a good way to offset costs for a tool we're building for ourselves.
Correct. Yep. And that was kind of our thought process, because again, we were running, moving and storage company that was a very successful company. My grandparents started it. My dad had a very successful career in it. We had multiple, like growing up, my parents had several homes. So we had a vacation house. The business had provided, right? And so our goal wasn't to sell this software to be able to make a living anymore. Like, it was never that point. It was to help us with our existing business. So after that developer didn't work out, we went through, I think, 3 more developers that were overseas, and none of them were bad. But the problem when you're working with developers overseas, it's rough. You're dealing with different times, as far as time zones. They're working in your night versus, we're working during the day. Communication is definitely a lot harder. Language barrier, accents is sometimes hard. And then just the at the end of the day, the point of it's hard to hold them accountable to do the work that you need done, because they're across the country. And there's tools to see how many hours they worked and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you're trusting them. You're trusting that they're billing you for 8 hours today. Did they really work 8 hours, or did they work 2? And so we went through 3 more devs, which again, weren't terrible, but they just weren't to what we needed it to be. They weren't seeing our vision. It just wasn't working. And that's about the time when we hit, where we had about $75,000 invested in it. And we realized that if we were going to do this, that 2 things need to happen. One, we needed to dump a ton more money into it. And two, we needed to get full-time people that this is what they were going to be. We need to turn this into a business. This isn't now a project for our existing company. This is now going to be its own company. And so that's when we found it was a husband and wife team that is in India. And we hired them, starting both of them full-time, which even then, 2 developers, for us then, that's a lot of money because it's not usually in your budget that you're hiring 2 developers for a moving company that's doing a couple $1 million a year, right? But we started with them, and then we went from 2 devs to 3 devs to 4 devs, and all on their team, and they're managing them. And they did a phenomenal job for years and years. And we built a great relationship with them where they, I think they counted on our business to provide for their family and their employees' families, that it always worked. There never was a situation where they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, or they weren't available when we needed them, because we became, a good sized customer for them.
So over that 5-year period of where you were building this product but not selling it to anybody, how much did you end up spending on this? Was that the $75,000, or was it a lot more than that?
Yeah. So by the time we sold our first customer, we had about $700,000.
So what kept you going and putting money into this product? This is like a pretty expensive internal tool at this point.
The first $75,000, we were looking at it as only an internal tool. We didn't think we'd make money on it. And at that point is when, I made the decision that I internally and myself, I have to make a decision whether I'm just going to scrap this project and I lost $75,000, or I'm going to go all in and I'm going to put every last penny of every cent I have and every last cent of money I make over the next 5 years extra into this product to make it work. And over that following 4 years is then where we put in another $600,000, which is a ton of money. But, and at that time in my life too, all of my friends were buying houses. All of my friends were buying brand new fancy cars. All of my friends, I didn't have any of that. I was making good money running a moving company. It was doing several $1 million a year, but all of that money was going into MovitPro. And it's easy to say now, but I knew it was something. I knew we were going to make it. And again, it's easy to say that now, but we didn't have competitors. There wasn't competitors. And I knew from us running a moving company, my grandparents, my father, us running a moving company, I knew how much it could help the industry as a whole and how much it could help independently owned moving companies, which is the majority of our customers. And I knew they'd pay for it. And so that was kind of my thing was, I was putting a lot of money, and it could have not worked, right? A lot of SaaS products don't work out, or, there's not a good niche or whatever it is, but, I had a gut feeling that it was going to work, and where I poured everything I had into it.
What was the time between the day you made the decision that I'm going to go all in and build this as a software business to the day that you got your first paying customer?
So it was about 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 4 years. So we had started using MovitPro internally in about 2014, but it was bare bones. I mean, it was nothing of what it is now, end of 2014. And then 2015, we finished doing pretty much like running a beta, right? I mean, we tested and tested and tested and used it in our own business. And then, that kind of led into how we got our first several customers, because we had friends that owned moving companies in other states that would, what are you guys using for software? Like, how are you guys doing it? You've been in business so long. And it's, we built our own. And then that's when it started turning into, when can we get it? How much is it? And we hadn't thought of any of that yet. We didn't know what the product was going to cost. We didn't know what features we'd include for what, it just, we knew we'd be able to make our money on it. And, we knew that it was something, and we knew we'd build it. But our primary focus just focused was to get the product done so we could start showing people and get customers.
But 4 years sounds like a crazy long time to wait to get that first sale. What was this, when you look back, do you feel like you were delaying until you got to a point where you had a perfect product? I mean, if it was good enough for you to use as a bare bones product for your business, surely you could have found other people who would have been happy to use it, and, it would improve over time.
So even us, we didn't start using it for 3 of that 5 years. We were developing it, right? But you have to remember, in the beginning, we were not putting as much money towards it. In the last year there, we were putting $200,000-$300,000 into it before we started selling it. So, it was a twofold. One is it was very important to us that we knew the product would be stable enough to be able to not ruin our name if we started selling it and problems happened. So, when you're running a product like a CRM for businesses, the last thing you could have happen is where you lose someone's data, or something that's a tragic thing that is very likely to happen in a new product without rigorous testing and it's been used and stuff like that. And, I think that was a big part of it, A. And B, you have to remember, I was running another company too. I was running a moving company, which even at that point, I had no intentions of ever getting rid of the moving company. My grandparents started it in the 60s. I grew up there. It was in my blood. There's pictures of me like 4 or 5 years old wearing a uniform for J&J Metro, the moving company we own. So it was one of those that, we knew we were going to start selling it. And, our goal was to get the majority of the features we wanted that we knew we needed to launch. It doesn't mean it's the right way. It doesn't mean that we couldn't have launched it earlier, because I think we could have, but it was more the approach we took, and which obviously ended up working out well, but it's kind of where we're at.
So let's talk about the first 10 customers. So the product is, you feel like around 2016, you feel like it's ready to go out there and you to start selling it. How did you find those first 10 customers?
So the first couple were, again, like I said, friends, people that we knew that owned moving companies that just kind of knew we were developing something. The hardest thing for any software company or any business is getting in front of the people that you need to get in front of that can make a decision on your product. Calling their offices and talking to their receptionists, you're never going to get anywhere. So us owning a moving company, we knew that Yelp had, and they still have it, they have a function where you as a business owner can claim your page. We all know that. And you can actually, as a moving company, you can have your customers request a quote on Yelp, on your profile page on Yelp, which that's no big deal. But here's the thing. When someone does request a quote on Yelp on your page, it sends a push notification directly to the owners of that page's cell phone. And it goes a little further. Yelp penalizes that owner if they do not respond to the message within a certain amount of time.
I can see where this is going.
So our push was, we probably, I hired a full-time girl, and that's what her job was. Full-time, you're on Yelp. This was how we started. We had to get a VPN that changed our IP address to defeat Yelp's algorithm that knew that we were sending too many messages. But that's how we started. And we started messaging hundreds of moving companies throughout the United States. And we probably signed up 50 moving companies in a matter of 2 months by doing this, because there's nothing better than being able to send a push notification to a prospect of your cell phone, and it penalizes them if they don't reply to you. And it was super nice. We were very forward with what we were. We say, hey, my name's, Samantha was her name. My name's Samantha. I'm with a company called MoveitPro. Hey, I'm just curious, what moving software are you guys using? That was it. And then, they would always reply, and then she'd send a link to our website. And that was it. But the point being is it got across to the right people. They saw it, they looked at it, and it was the most effective advertising we've ever done. Because, we all know text work, emails work, stuff like that, but something that's coming through that they think is a customer, right? They think it's a customer asking for a quote. They at least looked at it. And so that was a big help with getting us started and getting us where we were not in the red line anymore, and covering our development costs.
Let's talk about pricing. How do you price the product today? And then when you launched, what were you charging for the product? And how did you figure out the right pricing?
When we first launched, we had customers, and this plan did not work out as good because a lot of our customers weren't honest. So I'll tell you how it worked. So our first plan was revenue based. So that was our goal, was to try and help moving companies. So if you had a slow month, you paid us less. If you had a busier than hell month, you paid us more. And it went based on the jobs that are in their system when they marked them as completed. There's still some companies that pay us this way, and they're on our legacy plan, and they're great companies. And Gorilla Movers out of Wisconsin is probably our 5th customer, and it was found on Yelp. Two College Movers is another one in Colorado. They found us on Yelp. They're still on those plans, and it works for them because they're honest about it. But as you can probably assume, a large majority of customers, when they realize that they could just delete a few jobs or say that the job canceled, and then they weren't honest. So that we realized that plan wasn't going to work for what we wanted. So we more switched to a per user plan. And our current pricing, we charge for 3 users or less, it's $285 a month. For up to 5 users, it's $399 a month. And then it just, kind of goes from there if they have additional users and stuff. The majority of our customers, I'd say, are 5 users or less. We do have some big guys like Black Tie Moving, who's partly owned by the lead singer of the Rascal Flatts, Gary LeVox. So he owns part of that moving company. So they've got about 70 users in 15 locations throughout the United States.
So I think the revenue share pricing is interesting. You don't see that often. And I don't know whether it's because you came from that background of running a moving company that you wanted to come up with more of a business-friendly approach where you make less, you pay less kind of thing. Do any of your competitors do any pricing like that?
So none of them do it like that. Companies that we deal with now, there's a couple. ChargeV, that's how theirs is. So ChargeV is who we do our billing through. Theirs is based off of invoice volume, which works good for us. Our struggle was with just getting people to be honest. If they're going to be honest, the plan works beautifully. In which we have a bunch of companies, which are good-sized companies, and they're honest about it, and it is what it is. But I think the majority of the ones that weren't honest were small companies. There are 2 users, and the guy's running out of a spare bedroom of his house, and if he could save, $100 this month paying us, even though it took him 20 minutes to go delete jobs and fudge stuff, he'd rather do that than his bookkeeping grew right?
Okay, so the first 50 or 60 customers come through this interesting Yelp marketing channel. Where did the others come from? What else have you or did you do after that to find customers?
Our biggest lead source would be Google AdWords, like a lot of businesses. We spend, $10,000 a month or so. And that's been the same probably for, the last 4 or 5 years, about what we spend with Google AdWords. So on most keywords, we come up first for moving software for moving companies, stuff like that. We've done Capterra, which obviously I'm sure you're familiar with, but is a review site similar to Yelp, but for SaaS companies or software companies. We've done industry-specific trade shows. Before COVID, were very popular. We do a couple of those a year. But that's the majority, and then just referral customers. Movers talk. So, once one of them's using it, then they kind of communicate to their friends that are in the industry and stuff like that. And so we pick up customers there.
So 2016, first customer. How long did it take you to get to the first $1 million in ARR with this business?
So off the top of my head, I'm not exactly sure. I'm thinking it was probably around 3 years before we hit our first $1 million. Yeah.
So roughly, let's say around 2019 kind of time. At what point did you decide that you were going to run this business full time and basically exit from the family business that your grandparents had built since the 60s?
So it was right around when COVID happened. So we sold it January 4th of 2020. It was a struggle. MoveitPro was doing better and better. I was making more money. The company was bringing in more revenue than I knew that I could bring in with the moving company. The moving company, again, was a very successful company, but it required an owner to be extremely devoted to the operations of the company. And what I mean by that is it was one of those that you'd make a great living, but you were at the office every morning at 7:30. You were there till 6 o'clock every night, 7 o'clock at night, which that's not a big deal, right? But when a truck broke down on a Saturday afternoon, you were the one getting the phone call. When guys didn't show up because they were drunk or hungover or you're trying to scramble to get guys to cover jobs and stuff. It was a very stressful industry, which, right, those are all my customers now. Like, those are, so we know a lot and deal with them. But, being in the software, it was more about building a enterprise or building a corporate type environment where, the goal is that when I come in, I'm able to work on growing the business, not having to deal with if an employee showed up or didn't show up. And don't get me wrong, when the company was smaller, obviously I had to deal with those things, but the ability to be able to grow this and scale this company was far superior than what, a local moving company was. And I think that was my biggest battle, was because, this company had been in my family for 50 years, and it was kind of hard to let go of. And that, honestly, the last couple of years, that was the hardest thing, was letting go of it. And I don't want to let go of it, even though my time's split between both. But it was the best thing that I could have done, because being able to focus all of my time on building MoveitPro, building our product, building our team, getting the right people in the right place, on our management team and stuff like that. It was stuff I didn't have time to do before, because I was trying to put up fires from that company, put up fires with this company. It was exhausting.
So eventually you make the break, you exit from that business, you go full time into MoveitPro. What was the size of the team at the time?
We were like 10.
And so you've basically almost like more than tripled the size of the team since you've done that.
Yep.
What's been going, like, I can understand the landscape back in 2011 when you look and say, there isn't much in terms of moving software, and they want you to stick a server under your desk if you want to, kind of build this thing. But what's the landscape like today? Is there more competition? How much time do you spend thinking about what the competitors are doing versus focusing on the vision that you already have? How do you spend your time thinking about that?
So, there's definitely more competitors than there were, 10 years ago when we first started. There's probably 5 total. There's probably 2 or 3 that are really, ones that are comparable to us. Honestly, I love it. I love having competitors, because it helps push us to move further and further. And that's a cliche thing to say, but it literally is the truth, because that is what I think ruined the softwares before we built. Like we talked about, there was softwares that were built in the 90s. There were softwares that were built in the early 2000s before we did, but they were so outdated because they had no competition. And because they had no competition, they had no reason to update. They had no reason to continue to spend money on development. And so that's been something that from the beginning, once we realized we're turning this into a business, it's going to be ever evolving. We're never going to say, all right, we're done. The software's done. Let's just sell it now. Let's just keep selling it and make money. That's not our goal. That's not our vision. Our vision is to keep developers we have now, keep the same amount or more, and continually develop, adding new features, new functionality, and more things that can help, our customers grow their businesses and take care of their families. So, and going back to like competitors, obviously we look at what other competitors are doing to make sure that we are keeping up with times and making sure that, we're staying relevant. But the majority of our focus isn't on that. It's majority on our current roadmap, where we want to be at, and the things that we're going to continue to push our team, push our leadership, and push our development team to really keep us in the lead and keep us moving forward.
One thing I want to go back to, we talked about this crazy long period of about 4 years of going all in, building the product, getting to that first customer. If you could magically go back in time, what would you do differently this time round? Would you like to basically shrink that window and get from, commitment to this business to first customer faster?
For sure, right off the bat would have been going all in from the beginning. Like we talked about, the first year and a half, we were only at 75,000 invested, and it's because we were just, I keep saying we, but I was only putting in, part of my extra money making from home, from the moving company. And had I obviously started from the get-go that we knew we were going to sell this product, we were going to turn it into a product called MoveitPro and all this stuff, I think I would have been more aggressive from the beginning, which would have shaved at least 1.5 years, 2 years off of it, right? And then the other thing being is just, I held on, like I said, I held on too long to our family business. And even though my heart wasn't in it, my heart was in MoveitPro, but because the emotional attachment to a family-owned business and making my dad happy and keeping it in our family, and those are things that you struggle back and forth with until I finally made the decision, like, no, I can't do both well. Well is not okay for me. I need to do it great, and I can't do both great. If I do both of them, I'm only going to get them both. They're going to both can be here, and I need one of them to be here, and I can't do that with both. And that's finally where, having the ability to fully focus on MoveitPro and push and hire and hire and hire and get the right people is when, why we've grown so fast once we started selling and once we, started hitting, mile marker points.
Yeah. I mean, I think looking back, it's and having that perspective and clarity, it's obviously easier to see what you should have done or shouldn't have done. But when you're in the trenches and you've got all of these things going on and there's uncertainty and there's emotions and all of these things, it's a very difficult thing to do real time then. I think there's always some lessons when we sort of look back and, you sharing that perspective. I think maybe that might be helpful for somebody else who knows what they need to do, but maybe is struggling to pull the trigger. So we should wrap up. We should get on to the lightning round. I'm going to ask you 7 quick fire questions. Just try to answer them as quickly as you can. Are you ready?
You got it.
What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Work harder than everyone else.
What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
The 10X Rulebook by Grant Cardone. It's just a good motivational. I mean, it's a good book to try and build a brand or business with, and takes the excuses out of what we're all programmed to have. Whether it's call reluctance, picking up the phone, whether it's presenting to someone, whether it's whatever the things are. It's a rule book. It's a rule book to go by, and it's something to aspire to be.
What's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
Being a leader. There's a difference between being a boss and being a leader.
What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
So I think the biggest habit that I have is just to try and wake up early every morning, and try and really get through everything that I need to do in the day before the day starts. Because once I get to the office, it's hard. You got 100 emails, you got Slack messages from everyone, you got all this stuff, and then a lot of times, as a founder or manager, essentially you end up getting bogged down with all those things, and you're not able to get to the things that you need to be able to grow your company.
What's a new or crazy business idea you'd love to pursue if you had the extra time?
So probably another app. It says if you have more time. So at some point, I think we will be doing this. We obviously built a CRM for moving and storage companies, and there's a tremendous amount of code that we could use for building a CRM for like service-based customers, electricians, plumbers, stuff like that. It's not something that's in my roadmap that's going to be in the next couple years, but at some point, I think that may be something that we want to look at.
What's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
I love being on the water. Luckily with this business, it's provided well for us. About a year and a half ago, I bought a 70-foot yacht, and so we've taken that to the Bahamas and the Keys and Savannah, Georgia, and we actually will spend Christmas and New Year's in St. Augustine this year on the boat. Very nice.
And finally, what's one of your most important passions outside of your work and other than your boat?
Honestly, it's family, man. I got a 7-year-old daughter, and I would honestly say she's my passion for living. So I'm getting married also November 5th. So I got 3 weeks.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So between the two of them, keeps me busy.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking, and thanks for sharing your story and just kind of reflecting on some of the lessons that you've learned along the way, and how you basically are an accidental SaaS founder who never set out to build a SaaS business. I love that. And if people want to find out more about MoveitPro, they can go to moveitpro.com. And if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So best way is probably email. So that's Jason, Jason, .Bergenske, BERGENSKE @moveitpro.com.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's been a pleasure, and wish you and the team the best of success.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.